show you the virtues of the different types of diets out there, particularly like fasting and the keto diet. And so is he going live? I don't think so. Hi guys, Dr. Habib. Thanks for joining on a Thursday afternoon. It's gloomy out there. Let me see if I can cheer you up with some good information. And there's a lot of buzz about fasting, whether it's a keto diet or intermittent fasting, time feeding, things like that. So I wanted to go through some of those things and see if you can learn and we can benefit from that. In the meantime, I just want to say that if you have questions, you want to go live, absolutely feel free. The other thing is that everything I'm saying, I'm a physician. I have an office in Ashburn, Virginia, and Bethesda, Maryland. And so everything I say is based on my practice of medicine. So there may be studies, there may be theories, but then I practice it. So most of the things I'm going to tell you is based on my experience and the results I get. Now, that said, it's still, we're on social media. I'm here to give you information, general guidelines. It's by no way am I going to try to diagnose your problem or treat you over the social media here. Really, hopefully my information will educate you. And then if you have questions and you want to have a discussion with your physician, your primary care doctor, that would be good. Of course, I'm available as well. We're doing remote consults, telemedicine. We're still doing our physicals. We're even doing sort of in-house physicals and therapies as well for when the situation is appropriate. But we want to talk about fasting because, for much of us and many of you in the audience may be Muslims, Assalamu alaikum and Ramadan Kareem. So we are fasting right now. So I am not going to be drinking water or any kind of drinks, nor am I going to be eating until sunset, which will be around 8 o'clock or just after 8 o'clock today. And so the beauty of that, you may think I'm going to waste away and I'm going to be struggling. Hopefully not, because, when I start to talk to people, I love it and I get energized and I have lots of adrenaline running. So hopefully I may look tired because my sleep is disrupted. All right. So if people have questions, they can start, but I'm going to keep going. So we're having some technical glitches here. Let's just see if we can get connected. I'm not seeing people. Sorry about that. So we're going to be talking about fasting. So now we're live. Great. Well, it's a gloomy Thursday. I'm not going to repeat everything I just said, but I'm going to hopefully empower you with good nutritional advice, especially during this holy month of Ramadan. So the Muslims out there, Assalamu alaikum, Ramadan Kareem. And I myself am fasting. So this is highly appropriate, the information I'm going to be telling you because I'm doing the fasting right now. So for a Muslim, we're doing what's called the dry fast. That is no water, no food, nothing at all until sunset. So I'm going to tell you that I have plenty of energy and talking to people gets me energized, especially if somebody wants to come on live and ask me some questions about that. But the thing about fasting is that there's a lot of information out there. You've got time feeding. That means that, you're fasting for a certain time and then eating for a period of time. Intermittent fasting is something that came out of research from the University of South California, Dr. Lungo, who showed that with intermittent fasting, that he was able to get some amazing biological, biochemical results. And then you have what people refer to as keto diet. Now, there is no one better or worse, but they each one have virtue. So I wanted to sort of explore some of those with you. So if people have questions about fasting and so forth, this is after Ramadan. After all, Ramadan. So I'll start off by just saying that, some people struggle during this month because they may have a pre-existing condition, they may have gastric problems, and that's where someone like myself could advise people on how to best prepare for this period of fasting. And in addition, even people who are diabetic, even though one's on insulin, I could give them advice on that. So what I was telling people is that even though I'm a physician and everything that I am going to tell you, almost 90% of what I'm going to tell you is based on my experience. So it's not theoretical, it's factual. But here on social media, I can't give you really a diagnosis and treatment. All I can do is educate you so that you can maybe go to your regular doctor and then seek help. I myself am open to see patients remotely or in person. The office is open here in Ashburn, Virginia, and in Bethesda, Maryland. So we can do physicals, we can do therapies, and so forth. But fasting is important because just the whole point about fasting, when you are fasting, you are now creating an environment where the body's going to stimulate its stem cell regeneration. Almost like if you are going to be, dying, your body's innate mechanism starts to get activated. And that's the whole point of the fasting. It's all about signals. So when you're consuming refined carbs and overeating and too many calories, you're now going down the signaling pathway for aging and disease. Conversely, this was old news. Caloric restriction from like 20, 30 years ago, if not longer, or showed not only in animal studies, but in humans that not only do you live longer, but you have less disease. So that fact we already had. What was more interesting, as I was saying, Dr. Longo from the University of South California showed that when you do a certain type of a fast, and we'll go into his method, which is a prolonged, an intermittent fasting mechanism, and the studies that he did showed actually in animal studies that when the animal was being fasted, the organs shrunk. And then when you refed the animal, the organs would grow again. Not only that, what happens during the fasting phase is that your body goes into a survival mechanism. We call that autophagy. So things which are just useless, the body has a better way of cleaning them out. And one of the things about people who don't do caloric restriction is that that high glycemic index, that overabundance of calories, what it does is it creates a lot of inactive tissues, and those sort of clog up the system. So your normal cells can't regenerate and rejuvenate as effectively. So what happens when you're fasting is that you activate the autophagy pathways. And that what it does is like Pac-Man, little mice, they eat away the old stuff. So the good things, the things that rejuvenate can be activated. And so it's like an anti-aging thing. And for people who think that during fasting that you're going to waste away, it's probably more psychological and just more because of behavioral, because we're so used to drinking a coffee or water at a certain time. I haven't had my coffee, so I'm definitely not performing at the same level, but I'll get used to it. It's been already a few days, so I'm already over the caffeine, and I'm going to get used to it. The only thing now for us is that at night we stay up a little bit later to pray. We wake up a little bit earlier to start the fasting, so the sleep period isn't being interrupted during this month. But it's a spiritual month. It's not just about physical. It's that physical to help me become stronger mentally and hopefully spiritually as well. But going back to fasting is that, when cells get old, we call them senescence. They don't sort of die and disappear. Senescence just means that if they were still active, they could create havoc by mutating and causing cancer. So senescence is a state where they're just sitting around. And when you have autophagy, when you're fasting, you clean up those old cells so the new ones can now be vibrant. Because the old cells, which are senescent, which are kind of sleeping, you can't kind of bring those back. What you got to do, you got to clear them up. And there are many ways to do this. And so fasting, what we find is that it's an intermittent stress. So this can be replicated with other forms of intermittent stress. So intermittent fasting is a stress. High intensity interval training is an intermittent stress. Heat therapy, so saunas and heat shock therapies, they are intermittent stresses, and even hypothermia, although the data on hypothermia isn't as strong as the others. So all these intermittent stresses activate the immune system to stimulate stem cell regeneration, but in the same process, what it does is sort of cleans up the DNA. Any damages, it cleans it up. Proteins that are misfolded, it refolds them. There's mechanisms. That's what this intermittent stress does, particularly hypothermia. Hypothermia, what it does is it produces what we call heat shock proteins. So, protein structures are three-dimensional structures in your body. They are the key to mitochondrial function, how you deliver energy. And when the mitochondria doesn't work so well, it's because you've got senescent cells, you've got oxidation, you're eating too many calories, you've got high sugar levels, you've got blood pressure, you've got oxidation, you're damaging the mitochondria. So what happens with heat shock therapy is that because the mitochondria have protein pumps that actually produce ATP, which is energy, they become sluggish. And by creating heat shock proteins through hypothermia, that's where you go into a sauna above 150, maybe 170. The people in Finland went into sauna studies that way when the temperature went to 170 degrees Fahrenheit. I think anything over 150 is good. And what that does, it creates what we call heat shock proteins. Those heat shock proteins have a way to grab the old cells, old proteins, and capture them into a container, and then create the three-dimensional structure and release them back in. So when a protein, like in the mitochondria that produces energy, loses function, it loses its shape. It becomes a misfolded protein. And then the heat shock proteins grab the misfolded proteins, put a cap on top of them, and then it gets recoiled into a three-dimensional structure and becomes refolded and then released. It now becomes functional. So that's why intermittent fasting is a temporary stress. Heat shock therapy, meaning hypothermia, as well as intermittent exercise, intermittent high-intensity training. These are all great ways to scavenge old cells, stimulate stimulation of regenerative new cells. So it's really like an anti-aging process. It's slowing down the aging process. So even if you get older, you'll function well. Even if you get older, you won't be on prescription medication. Even if you get older, you shouldn't necessarily have to have disease. So I myself have many genetics for blood pressure, inflammation, as I've said to many, many people, even dementia. But if I continue on my path, then I shouldn't express those diseases, because every time I fast, my DNA is being protected. Every time I fast, I'm scavenging up old cells, right? So not only during Ramadan, even after Ramadan, I do a wet fast. What that means is that when I wake up in the morning, I'm not having breakfast, I just have a black coffee. During the day, I'm taking my vitamins and beverages, water. Very little calories. Carbohydrates break fasting. So if you have some moderate amount of fat, you could get away. Fat like avocados and fat like nuts, fat like olives. You could actually maintain a fasting state because the signals are still positive for intermittent fasting. So I go through the whole day till maybe dinner time when I finish my workout, outside of Ramadan. And then I would have my main meal of the day. And then I would eat for maybe, over a period of 2 or 3 hours. And then once I get to sleep, I start my cycle again. So going back to what we said about the fasting, and then whether it's a keto fast or intermittent fast or time feeding. Hi there. We're going to talk about intermittent fasting. A question here. Let's see here, as people are joining. The types of food to consume. I'm going to go into that. Very good, because fasting is only as good as how you break your fast. Because during the fasting, as I was saying, is that your body's going to not get glucose, right? So if you have a keto diet, you're going to have very little glucose in it, right? You're supposed to have primarily protein and fats. And the mistake people might make is that it's going to be clean protein and clean fat. Intermittent fasting is the ultimate keto because when you don't eat, then you're in ketosis. The definition of both of those, whether it's time feeding, fasting, and intermittent fasting, and keto diet, is that you stop breaking glucose because it's not available. When your body doesn't have glucose to break down, then it's going to turn to the body fat and break down the fats into free fatty acids and use that as fuel. And as people who've listened to me, that fuel is great for the brain, particularly when you get over the age of 30. And if you have certain genetics like I have, which is called ApoE. So if you have ApoE, you do not want to give yourself carbohydrates, particularly at night or anytime. You want to keep the carbs low. So that's why I always maintain some degree of ketosis. I always maintain a kind of a keto diet, but I intermittently fast. Maybe on the weekends, I give myself a break just to, so the body doesn't get used to any one way, because your body is very efficient. And when you want to burn calories and you want to stimulate things, you have to trick the body. So this intermittent fasting is like a stress, but if you keep stressing the body the same way, the body will become smart and figure out how to get around it. So you want to change things up. Don't do the same thing every single day. Try to break it up, alternate a little bit of the different types of fasting. But let's talk about when your body's breaking down fatty acids into ketones. So there's a special type of a ketone called alpha hydroxy, actually beta hydroxybutyrate. Butyrate, that word comes up over and over because not only is it a positive signal in your blood, but butyrates and butyrates are short-chain fatty acids that microbes like as well, right? So that's why fats, when they're broken down and into free fatty acids, that's one way. But let's concentrate on when you're depriving your body of carbohydrates, hopefully refined carbs for sure, but you keep the carbs low, and we will go into food later on, then your body has to turn to fat. And when the fat is broken down, you're making ketones, and beta hydroxybutyrate is not only the signal and the fuel for the brain and different organs of the body. So even athletes, I believe, are now training on a keto diet and doing just fine. And what's important is that it's a molecule that also has a very positive anti-aging signal. So it's good at repairing the DNA, good at repairing the mitochondria. So when people talk about chronic disease, when they talk about fatigue, when they talk about inflammation, the mitochondria is really at the root of all of that. We can talk all day long about the gut and the liver, but all of that is to support the mitochondria. So when you do the fasting and you go to keto, you're actually going straight to the molecular signals, straight to the mitochondria. You're bypassing the gut, bypassing the liver in an amazing way, because this is probably from evolution. When humans would had food, they would store it and consume it in large amounts for a period, and then they would go through famine, and in that period, they would have to have a survival mechanism. So I believe that these are part of the intrinsic survival mechanism. So when people are fasting, a lot of people think they're going to waste away. And the studies have shown with intermittent fasting, where you're not like fasting for crazy 20 days in a row, that you actually liberate amino acids called isoleucine, right? Now, so if you're fasting intermittently, as you fast, not only are you getting all those other health benefits of autophagy, cleaning up the old cells, stimulate stem cell regeneration, you're activating sirtuins actually, and the sirtuins are keeping the DNA clean, repairing the mitochondria, repairing the misfolded proteins. Now we're talking about how the intermittent fasting can actually stimulate the survival mechanism that is inherent in humans, and that's where it starts to release that amino acid. So you don't actually have to go ahead and have lots of protein, because your body's going to liberate it. And so the most important thing about fasting is that after that period of fasting, you want to feed yourself well. The refeeding will then start to rebuild. You remember the mice studies? When they fasted the mice, the organs shrunk. When they fed the mice, the organs became bigger. So it's analogous, and in humans it probably does do that, but we can't say conclusively. But for sure, when the body is going through the fasting stage, it's down-regulating the aging signal. So IGF-1, mTOR, AMPK, they're down-regulating, so in a conservation manner, right? In a conservation manner, and that is conducive to having less disease and slowing down the aging process, particularly during the critical age. I'm going to tell you that there's a time for eating lots of protein and a time not to eat a lot of protein. I'll go over that later on. But so as you down-regulate these things with fasting, when you break your fast, you're going to upregulate the AMPK, you're going to upregulate the mTOR and the IGF. Those are just the amazing signals that really tell your body to go into an aging state or an anti-aging state, into a disease state or a healthy state. And so when you have low calories, low carbohydrates, then the AMPK goes down and the IGF goes down. When you have a low protein diet, then your mTOR goes down. So temporarily you may think, oh my God, I can't bodybuild. That's not true, because your body will release the amino acids. So when you come to refeeding yourself, it's important to have healthy fats and healthy proteins. You can have healthy proteins from vegetables and beans and lentils. Even potato has protein, even rice has protein, but of course there is a heavy carbohydrate load there. So you want to focus on the proteins that have carbs in a complex form. And root vegetables would be a great form of complex carbs. So root vegetables like yams and sweet potato to a degree. And a sweet potato is more like a regular potato, but it is better. It's very nourishing. But there are pure root vegetables in the yam family and the yucca family. So those are complex carbohydrates. And then, of course, you can have whole grains. These are complex, no doubt. Quinoa is complex carb. And, wild rice might be there, and whole grain barley. Those are good. But we have to be a little bit, we're having some little connection problem. We're back now. We're good. So we're going back to feeding. And when you feed yourself, then you activate it. You upregulate those mTORs to rebuild your muscles, and you activate that with healthy proteins. And then the IGF-1, again, you don't want to have surges of refined carbs. The complex carbs will help you in rebuilding your body when we talk about that organ getting bigger and healthier. So those are some of the benefits of sort of fasting. And so for people who want to start their fast, I personally, what I did before I started my fast, which was like at before 5 in the morning, more like 4:45, something like that, I had a nut bar. So it was primarily almonds and cashews. So if you're allergic to nuts, then you might try seeds. pumpkin seed and sunflower seeds and things. If you're allergic to that, then you might want to go with like, whole proteins like chickpeas and beans and lentils, things like that. Even some animal meat. So, meat that is grass-fed is going to be high in omega-3 and less of the saturated, less of the harmful fats, less of the toxic fats. So, what happens when you have olives and fats like coconut and nuts like that, they will satisfy you and help you so you won't get those hunger pangs as readily. And so I'm always good to hydrate before I start my fast. And then when I break my fast, I try to hydrate as much as I can. And again, the body gets used to it because I'm doing a dry fast. For people out there who are not fasting for religious reasons, of course, I condone the fact that you can have your black cup of coffee, black cup of tea, and then you can have, any kind of herbal drinks, primarily hot, because hot stimulates the gut, right? And that's always a good thing. When the gut is stimulated, it stays healthy by being moving in the right direction, as opposed to the opposite, constipation. You hold on to toxins for longer. You don't feel as happy, right? So hot drinks stimulate good kinetic flow of your intestines. And so for people during the day, they can have, as I said, they can have nuts as well, because they won't break their fast by that. The way to remember is that if you had a whole bagel, you might be close to breaking your fast, because a whole bagel is about 30 grams of carbs. Not only is it 30 grams, it becomes sugar right away. Now, if you had, say, 30 grams of carbs from chickpeas, beans, and lentils, you're not going to get the same surge in sugar, so you won't break the fast. But I don't recommend getting to 30 grams of carbs myself. I would say that what you want to do is try to maintain either zero food intake and just have your beverages, or have a little bit of nuts here and there and a little bit of fats of some kind. So if you want to carry around your butter, feel free. I personally wouldn't. And coconut oil, feel free. I wouldn't personally. But have something fatty like olives. Some kind of dish that you can is primarily fatty. So when Dr. Longo created his Prolong, which is the intermittent fasting, he didn't actually make it 0 calories. What he did was a low caloric. The first day he allowed about 500 calories. The subsequent days down to about 500 to 700 calories for a 5-day period. But what he did was that he, through his studies, realized, confirmed that by giving coconut fat primarily and some nut fat and some olives and some soups, so they got the calories, and that's more calories than fasting, clearly, but it still maintained that intermittent fasting state. And when he did that for 5 days in a row out of a whole month, and he did that on 3 consecutive months, he proved that intermittent fasting, where you just do not break the signals, where you keep those growth signals down into IGF-1, AMPK, and mTOR, when you keep those down, what happens is that those patients, they lost weight. Their blood pressure went down. Their blood sugar went down. Their cholesterol went down. And wait for this, their inflammation marker went down. So here I am telling you that I know how to bring down inflammation taking supplements. You can actually bring it down with intermittent fasting. So Prolon is his brand, so I'm not here to promote him necessarily. But the principle is, if you do this fasting, and you can do your own, right? You do 5 days of intermittent fasting where you're eating fats during the day, or try to fast as much as possible during the day. And at night, don't blow the calories to over like 700, 1,000 calories, which is doable. You just have to have a lot more vegetables because they have much fewer calories. And even the beans and the lentils, you have to be a little bit careful because they are dense. They're good quality, complex carbs. But you could actually achieve that under 1,000 calories. And you'd still be in an intermittent state, because the what he proved is hope for people that you can actually control disease parameters without a drug. You can actually control disease parameters without a vitamin. You just have to understand the value of intermittent fasting. And so, as I said, keto is great because you're producing ketones by having clean protein and clean fats. Those ketones are beta hydroxybutyrate, which have positive signals on anti-aging and great fuel for the brain. And so you're also you're cleaning up the body by being in that state. I think truly intermittent fasting has evidence to show about cleaning up the old cells and regenerating, re-stimulating. Keto diets haven't proven that. With the keto diet, what happens is that you are getting the positive effects of not having sugar available. You're not turning on that aging pathway. You are now stimulating the anti-aging pathway to some degree with positive signals from beta hydroxybutyrate and other ketones in your body. So that's for sure. But how much stem cell regeneration, we're not sure. And does it reduce inflammation? Does it lower blood pressure? I haven't come across any literature on those kind of things so far. So if anybody wants to go live, feel free. And then some people might say, how long should you fast? So that's where time feeding comes into it. What they showed research was that, for example, if you ate the same calories, but in a certain window of time, over 8 hours, should we say, and the rest of the time you were fasting, then you actually lost weight. So you ate the same number of calories, same amount of food, but it's a time period. You gave yourself time where you rested the gut and stimulated the body to kind of get itself going, so that when the refeeding came, you activate the metabolism. That's AMPK. AMPK is stimulated by short-chain fatty acids from eating good foods with lots of fiber that the bacteria love, and they produce the short-chain fatty acids. So here's some questions here. Fasting during COVID. Yep, look, so there's two ways of looking at it. If you do a very severe fast, that means like over 24 hours maybe, which is not what I'm condoning. So even for people during Ramadan, we're not fasting 24 hours. We're fasting from probably 5 a.m. to 8 p.m. How many hours is that? That's over 12 hours. I think it's like 15 hours. That's all it is, right? 15 hours? It's not that long. So I myself on a normal day could do easily 16 hours. But then in a normal day outside Ramadan, I'm having my coffee and my beverage. I'm busy. It goes by pretty good. And I can even get a workout in no problem. And during Ramadan, I will do it just as soon as my body gets used to it, which is about now. 5 days into it, I'm used to it. I'm going to go out start training again. So the question was about fasting during COVID, right? This is positively good for you if you do what we do is time feeding or intermittent fasting. That means that you are still breaking your fast. And when you break your fast, you're getting all the positive signals. But during the fasting, you're activating your immune system. You're cleaning up the body so it's getting ready. When you nourish it, it's going to those nutrients are going to be amplified. You could eat the same nutrients, as proven, as I said, with the time feeding, that they ate the same calories over a shorter period of time. They lost weight. That was just one parameter. But I am pretty sure that those people, when you just give your body a break, you upregulate all the innate mechanisms of survival and optimization of the immune system. So I think that is when you would be able to positively be able to defend yourself against COVID. And most importantly, when you refeed yourself, make sure you get some good quality berries in there, right? Berries are particularly good because, especially if you get them organic, because berries are a lot of pesticides on them. And you'll find that if you get them frozen, they'll be even cheaper. So if you get them fresh, they're kind of expensive. You get organic frozen berries from Costco. They're not much more expensive than regular berries. And then what happens with the berries is that they're high in polyphenols. Polyphenols not only nurture good bacteria in the gut, they're actually nutrients that lower inflammation in the brain. They actually open blood vessels up. So there's a lot of benefits of having good berries when you break your fast, good fats when you break your fast. So whether you like, hummus, you put a lot of tahini, right? That's sesame seed oil. So get some fresh tahini or good quality tahini in there. Get your olive oil in there. Get your chickpeas, which is complex carbs, right? Complex carbs, proteins, fiber. It's like a complete meal, really. Now, that's for people who like it. Now, for a dip, instead of using your pita bread, why don't you use some vegetable? Now, I know I'm sounding a little harsh on people. I actually like crunching into some broccoli and some raw broccoli, raw cauliflower, some celery, some carrots in it. And when you try to eat those fresh stuff, boy, does your jaw hurt, all that fiber and roughage. So that's why the beauty of it. Now, if you wanted to find a substitute, an alternative, they are making tortilla bread out of coconut flour, right? So coconut flour is high fat and high protein. So you're not going to get the carbs. They're making, pasta out of lentils now. So that's protein. So there's no carbs. And so I'm not saying that's good dip for hummus, but be creative. Maybe you can try that. So when we have, say, pasta and we put pesto on it, why don't you put some hummus on it and put some seasoning on that? And it will make it thicker and it will make it richer and creamier. And you can put your extra bit of salt and pepper or garlic or some other herbal products. So think outside the box. And by the way, tune into some of my Instagram stuff because I do have cooking demos on there. And not to show you that I'm a great cook, it's just that I like cooking. I like going shopping. I like to see what I'm buying. I like to prepare it. I like to make it fresh. And I like the feeling when I'm feeding my kids, that even if they don't like it. I love it if they can eat my food, right? So hopefully that answered the question about COVID and fasting. If people want to go live, feel free. But any other questions? And if you don't, then I'm going to keep on yapping away because I can just yap away. And let's see here. So how about metabolism? Does the fasting mess up your metabolism? Oh, no, on the contrary. So if you did like a complete 24-hour fast, 24-hour fast and you're not eating and drinking, and you do that for 3 days, you're going to go crazy. It's actually good for your health, but you're going to look really bad. So there was a doctor, I forget his name now. He lived in this biosphere, right? The name will come. Reardon. Wow, see that free fatty acids? It's feeding my brain. That ketosis, the brain is sharp. And as I'm getting older, my brain is getting sharper, actually. It's moving faster. My reaction time is getting faster. It's because I'm cleaning up my diet. So, and I'm talking too much. So let's go back to answering what we said. So Dr. Reardon decided to be his own guinea pig. He lived in the biosphere for 2 whole years. 2 whole years. And he did his fasting in a very rigorous manner. I mean, with very low caloric intake, no carbohydrates, right? And he showed every single parameter of health went up. His sugars went down, blood pressure went down, insulin sensitivity, inflammation, all the positive things happened. But he proved that in 2-year period that you can become healthy. But what happened is that when you looked at him, he looked like he was out of a prison camp. He was wasted. And so I would say that when you do something in an extreme manner, there are some benefits, but there could also be some risks involved. And I don't think that an average person, even I'm considered an average person, I'm lining up to be in a sphere for 2 years with that kind of strict diet. So I think for most people, it's going to be very hard for them to do a crazy fast for days at a time. That's when you might get into a temporary trouble. Temporary means temporarily you'll be a little bit immune compromised, right? A little depleted. So you'll be a little bit more vulnerable, right? You don't have as much energy. And what they say, though, in the studies is that after the 3rd day, when the body gets used to it, people have shown that their energy level comes back up. So this is a remarkable thing about the survival mechanism of the human being. So again, I don't know how many people, this has all been done by people in study environments. So the average person won't go 2-3 days not eating or drinking anything, right? Or at least not eating anything. And so, but what they showed that after the 3rd day, the hunger pains went away, the body was able to liberate amino acids. They could actually go on and actually have the energy to keep going, which was amazing. I think there was a Scottish guy who was like about 400 pounds. And for a whole year, he went through fasting, a whole year. And he would just have, obviously hydration was the main thing. And it was amazing. The guy actually not only lost weight, but he remained healthy and he functioned at a reasonable level, at a high level. So going back to what we said about, fasting and will it downregulate the metabolism, to a degree, you are right? But that's where the benefits come from. You're down-regulating what we call AMPK. That's the master signal for metabolism. So temporarily, you're down-regulating during fasting, but you're up-regulating stem cells, and your body's waiting to upregulate that same signal when you refeed it. So if you refeed without refined carbs and you have good quality foods, then you will then stimulate the AMPK, and then your metabolism will be upregulated in a much more advanced manner, more magnified manner. And that was proved, as I said, with time feeding, that they ate the same calories, but they only ate it for a certain period, and the rest of the time they were fasting. So during the fasting, the body downregulated the signal, waiting for the opportunity for the food, and then it upregulated, and their metabolism went up, so they were able to lose weight. So hopefully that kind of information helps about metabolism. The more you realize, the moderation, I would say the summary is, if you are moderate about the carbohydrate intake, even if people like to eat some carbs, be moderate about it. I can't get away with it because I have the ApoE gene. My genes doesn't give me a lot of room for cheating. So, and maybe up to 25% of the population might have that gene. So you should get tested. And at Next Health here, a plug for myself is that I don't guess, right? When I tell you about genetics, I'm measuring the genetics. When I tell you about, any markers, I'm measuring these markers. When I tell you about nutrients, I'm measuring them. When I give you advice about how to take them to get an endpoint, not that you're going to take that as prescription from me, you're going to talk to your doctor for them to prescribe whatever they prescribe. But when I treat my patient, I'm actually getting the results where I lower the blood pressure, I lower the cholesterol, I lower the inflammation, I lower the weight. And so I can, I do very good. I do very well at down-regulating inflammation in autoimmune disease patients. Even if I can't cure them, I bring it down tremendously, right? And so even I had a case where a young boy who, started getting dry eyes, dry mouth, and one of the rheumatological markers was elevated, but not enough for the rheumatologist to want to treat him. So I started my usual protocol of cleaning up the the gut system, the immune system. It started to identify what he was deficient in, particularly the antioxidants, boosted that, had other therapies to boost his immune system through infusions of nutrients. And then what happened is that his symptoms after 1 month started to go down. And so this boy, I actually told him not to fast only because, he needed to stay hydrated. With the dry eyes and the dry mouth, that could only be made worse by the dryness that comes with the fasting. So I gave him a prescription for that. There was somebody else that told me that, during this month of Ramadan, maybe they shouldn't fast because last year they got kidney stones and they ended up in the urgent care. And I said, well, why don't you fix your kidney stone? Then you can still fast. And by the way, fasting didn't cause your kidney stone, even though there was some dehydration state going on. If he embarked on a plan of eating a plant-based diet, which is high in minerals, which alkalinize your body, there's less room for the body to create what we call oxalate stones. The stones that come from kidneys are primarily oxalate. You can have stones made out of other kinds of calcium deposits. But you get those deposits when you're in an acidic state, when your body is healthy and you're in an alkaline state. So even during the Ramadan, I think my body's much cleaner. My tongue is pink. Usually if I eat a little bit too many carbs, I can see the furriness on my tongue. During the month of Ramadan, it's already been 5 or 6 days. My tongue is clean. It's pink. The way it used to be in my 30s. And in my early 40s, it changed. And I had to make remarkable transition, I should say. I had to evolve and clean up my diet. I knew my genetics were where my problems were. And I couldn't get away with certain things in my diet. And so then I kind of had to go further and further. And for that reason, I've now found that not only that fasting during the non-Ramadan days is so good for me, that Ramadan is just a time where I'm going to you really hunker down and use my power on my brain, that I don't need the coffee. I don't need anything. Yeah, sure, I'm human. I'll get tired, but I don't need it because I know the science tells me that I have everything I need. My liver will liberate glucose when sugar comes down. My body has produced ketones, which will become fuel for my cells, fuel for my brain, fuel for my organs. So, I don't have any reservations in that so far. So any other questions? So I will continue the conversation about, people talked about the food. So let's talk about a little bit about recipes and stuff like that. So during the intermittent fasting, for people who are not doing it for religious reasons, you can have fats, as I said, coconuts and nuts and olives and things like that. You can actually make it pretty, like I said, they make tortillas out of coconut flour. So you could have that as your meal and you may not break your fast as readily. Just bear in mind that when people are on the keto diet, even though they're not having carbohydrates, protein does get converted to sugar. So that's probably why the keto diet probably won't get the same benefits as intermittent fasting, because you truly have to have zero carbs or very low carbs to maintain that intermittent fasting state where you're stimulating stem cell regeneration, the DNA repair, the mitochondrial repair. And that with people who are on the keto diet, they probably have a lot of protein. And unfortunately, some have less than clean protein because they enjoy those fats maybe too much. But the clean proteins will certainly help you. But too much of that will be converted to glucose as well. Because remember, your body has to get fuel from somewhere. So if you don't give it glucose, if you don't give it carbs, if you don't give it proteins, and then it's going to break down your body fat. And so that's good, right? That's a good thing. So I actually found that, as I'm getting older, and I'm not a naturally built person, I have to work out to maintain it. So now that I'm not working out as regularly, I don't feel like I'm kind of losing my muscle mass as readily, because, as I said, my body's reprogrammed now. It's fasted, it's liberating amino acids, I eat good, and even if I'm not exercising, of course, when I exercise, not only do I stimulate the muscles, they become toned and conditioned. And so when you use your muscles, the beauty of using your muscles, even during Ramadan, is that you now will activate your metabolism even further, right? You're going to activate it even further. The food that you're going to eat, particularly the carbs, will be metabolized and utilized, and that will then the exercise will stimulate the muscle mass, which will support metabolism. And when you're exercising, you're releasing nitric oxide. As you know, I've talked so much about nitric oxide. That nitric oxide is one of those amazing chemicals, molecules in your body that, even though it goes down with age, that's because people are not eating the right way. That's because people are not exercising. I do not believe for a minute it's going down, because, as I said, my parameters have shown that it's leveled off. since I made my dramatic changes in my 40s, I have found that over the next decade, it's leveled off. And that's what I believe is true, slowing down the aging process. So even though I have genetics for blood pressure and cholesterol and diabetes and inflammation and heart disease, that if with God's grace, what will happen is if I go on this path where my body is regenerating itself and not allowing it to what we call another word for it's called degeneration, right? Degeneration is, you could just call it aging, right? It'll slow that process down. So at the very least, what I'm looking for is I don't want to be diagnosed with diabetes or blood pressure, cholesterol, heart disease. I want a normal lifespan, whatever that may be. I want to be as healthy as I can. I want to be as active as I can. Not only my brain, my body as well. So I enjoy going out to do physical activities. I enjoy my food. And God has gifted us with so much good quality food that it's not, the mindset that people have is not what you're being deprived of. Think of what you have been given and what you can have. And then your eyes. So when I go grocery shopping, I look at all the things I can have, and that gets my taste buds going, and my menu ideas start to come up and about. So stay tuned. There's going to be a Ramadan video on cooking when my guy gets it out. So that was all cooking from scratch. Okay, so how about breakfast? So what would you recommend with breaking the fast? So breaking the fast actually means breaking fast, right? Breakfast. So when people wake up and they have breakfast, that's what they're doing, breaking their fast. So for people who love so this is what I think. I neglected this. The same period of time for me to fast does not have to be the same for you. The most important thing for you to understand is that so long as you have a period of fasting, and that can be any time in the day, but I'm going to tell you some other science in a minute, that'll work for you. So someone who loves their breakfast, again, have good breakfast. I don't want you having waffles and pancakes and toast, because that's still refined carbs in my book. You have to decide what you think about breakfast. For my kids, I would give them sometimes grilled salmon and lamb chops for their breakfast. They would have oatmeal for their breakfast. They would have wholesome food for their breakfast. Right now, they're not having breakfast either. They're also fasting, and they're eating some evening mealtime things before their fast starts. So my point about breaking fast, if you must have your breakfast, that's great. Have a really good meal and start your fast after that, and go 12 hours, 14 hours, ideally around 16 hours. 12 is, I think, too little. 14 is the sweet spot. 16, definitely, there's a lot of science with 16 hours, okay? If you're a person that loves their lunch, which I think is a great thing, because remember, during the daytime is when you're supposed to be awake. During the daytime is when your body's more active. You expect your metabolism. So it's actually okay to eat during that time. I have no problems with having a breakfast and then starting your fast and going 16 hours. Or for those people who want to have the big lunch, have your lunch and have a good, wholesome lunch with good amounts of fats in it so it satisfies you, good amounts of lean, clean protein, and lots of vegetables in there. And then start your fast and go the 16 hours. For me, it's easier to finish my dinner at 9 o'clock. And then, because now Ramadan, I break my fast at 8 o'clock, I'll eat till 9 o'clock, and shortly after that, I'll stop. And then, so I'm starting my fast. So even before I truly begin my fast, I'm actually fasting, because when I'm supposed to get up before my religious fast, I'm starting it, with like a nut bar and water, hydration, right? And I take my vitamins as well. Then I'm basically not having food or water all the way till 8 o'clock. So strictly speaking, I'm not eating anything from 5 to 8 o'clock, but actually I'm not eating anything from 9 p.m. to all the way 8, because even the fats wouldn't have broken my fast. That would have been a signal that would have not broken my intermittent fasting there. Now, with intermittent fasting, what would you recommend with breaking the fast? So look, breaking the fast, I think hummus is a great idea. Baba ganoush, which is a, eggplant mushed up, that's great. It's really a vegetable. And so, when we broke our fast, what we do is we take a beverage and take a little bit of a date. For diabetics, I tell them to take the date after they eat the meal, because the date is high in sugar. So one big, large date is equivalent to 2 teaspoons of sugar. So imagine how much of a sugar surge that is. So I like the prophetic values of the date. But for a diabetic, I think you should keep that date until after you've drunk the water, had a little bit of protein in your body. So what we do is we go straight to our meal. So when we break the fast, we have our date, we have a little beverage, maybe a snack that the kids like, and we do our prayer, and then we go back to the main meal. And so we have salads in there, we have protein in there. So it could be salmon one day, it could be lamb chops another day, it could be beef another day. So we have a variety of either fish protein and sometimes animal protein. And then we always have vegetables. We rotate through the cruciferous vegetables. So whether it's broccoli or cauliflower or cabbage, things like that. And you just have to make it a little bit interesting. So for the kids, what I try to do is mix, say, barley and beef together, or barley and seafood. So barley is a complex carbohydrate. So even my kids, I don't sort of let them go crazy with refined sugars. There's just no need for it. In nature, you don't have sugar. In nature, sugar does not grow from the tree. You know, in nature, you even though you have fruits, one fruit is, you know, how many grams of sugar. By the time you juice it with 5 fruits, that's too much, right? So, you know, you have the whole fruits if you're going to have it, but I never break the fast with the fruit. I try to eat some kind of protein in there, some kind of vegetable in there. I definitely have water in there. Then I'll have my fruits in there and the dates and so forth. So that's the way I would break my fast. So hopefully you get the essence of how to lose fat weight during Ramadan. Look, listen, you are supposed to lose fat weight. The only thing that I can think of why people during Ramadan actually gain weight is because when they break their fast, they're eating the wrong foods. They're eating the samosa, they're eating the pakora, they're eating the jalebi. These are Indian terminology. Anyway, the Indian version of junk food, right? So, you know, if you're going to break your fast and you're going to have French fries, not a good idea. So I think what happens is that people get deprived, and I'm human, so I think about food too. But don't go crazy about thinking about food, because, you know, once you break your fast, if believe it or not, you get full very easily, very quickly. It's only you forcing yourself to eat more, because when you're fasting, your stomach is shrinking, and it's shrunk, especially with the dry fast where you're not drinking water or eating anything. So when you eat, you get full. And it's only your brain that's telling you to keep eating. I'm telling you, your brain is telling you you're full because you have chemicals that go out. It's called leptin, right? Your leptin is supposed to tell you. Now, I know there's some people with leptin resistance. That's for another day. But so my point is that just look very carefully about what you're eating. If you don't give yourself carbs, particularly refined carbs, and you just give yourself some reasonable amount of protein, then your body has to turn to fat to break it down. Unless you're eating an excessive amount of protein, excessive amount of fat, then there's no need for you to break it down. You know, what they say is that it takes about 1 to 3 days for you to break down the stores of fat. So you have stores of fat in your liver, you have stores of fat in your muscle fibers, you have stores of your fat inside your body. So when you're fasting for the first 3 days, you're not going to lose any weight necessarily. You've got to get rid of those stores first, which you can't see. It's inside the abdomen, it's inside the organs itself. That's why the fasting is a great way to get rid of fatty liver disease, right? Just because the stores of fat are going to be broken down to produce fuel because you're not giving yourself sugar. So after that, so that's why in the first week of Ramadan, I may lose half a pound, and subsequent weeks of Ramadan, I'd lose at least half a pound to 1 pound. So during the whole of Ramadan, I usually lose about 3 to 5 pounds, which is a lot for me because I'm not very heavy to begin with. But that's not the way it used to be. When I was almost like 13, 15, 17, I got my act together after 17. I was 180 pounds, 5'4", 180 pounds. I was fat all over. Fat cheeks, fat arms, fat thighs, fat abdomen. You know, my pants would wear away in the middle of the thighs because the thighs would rub on each other. So I know what I'm talking about. But what I didn't know is that I didn't know my genes then. In the 1990s, we used to have a high carb diet and low fat diet. That was the worst possible diet for me. Even in my 30s, I didn't understand it. So if I ate sandwiches and stuff, it would do havoc, but I didn't understand. But as I got older, it made more of an impact. So even though I lost my weight, baby weight, and I was disciplined, but I was disciplined. That's why as I got older, you know, my metabolism did go down actually, because I probably didn't sleep enough, got stressed out and so forth. But as I got older, I just got much more disciplined. And so that's why, you know, you find that then when you're disciplined, you're in that zone, and you go off the zone just a little bit. Just before Ramadan, I was off the zone a little bit, but I'm using Ramadan to get me back in the zone. I'm already in the zone, so I want to use this advantage of getting physically strong, mentally strong. I want to be strong after Ramadan, and I want to continue strong. I had to lose weight during fasting, and then all right. Yeah, well, I'd like to wave at everybody, but so somebody specifically asked to wave at Rena. So hi, Rena. But the wave at everybody here. And can fasting bring your potassium levels down? I'm not aware of it. I mean, if you know something, let me know. I'd love to engage, you know. So I'm always open to communicating. and answering questions. So if you have a potassium problem, then make sure that you eat a food that's rich in potassium, which will help lower people's blood pressure, right? So when you break fast, have, in your meal in that period, have cantaloupe and have watermelon, because they're not only high in citrulline, they're high in potassium. Your banana is high in potassium, but I look at banana as the middle of the road, because you got things much more, foods with much more potassium, namely, as I said, watermelon, cantaloupe. They have about 100 milligrams of potassium more than bananas. Bananas have about 450, something like that. Your green leafy vegetables like kale and spinach has even more potassium. And your beans have, black beans and red beans have potassium. In fact, the white bean has probably the highest amount of potassium. So remember I was talking about beans is such a wonderful thing. So many types of beans out there, but the white bean has about 800 milligrams of potassium, right? Per 100 grams serving of, so what all the things I mentioned, per 100 grams. So I would say that if you have an issue with potassium, then have those, all these wholesome foods. I didn't have to mention potassium. They would have been high in potassium. They would have been high in minerals. They've been high in fiber. That's why, you don't have to go crazy about thinking, oh, which food I got to eat. Just eat wholesome foods, clean protein, have a variety. Think of all the wonderful things you can eat. And maybe during this month, we can all create new menu ideas, especially when you're stuck at home. And maybe we can share that and pass that along and enjoy what we have and use those as part of our nourishment, because that's the way to boost your immune system, right? A healthy gut is a healthy immune system. So it doesn't matter about the vitamin C and the omega-3 and the vitamin D and the zinc and all the things I tell you. You must still have a healthy gut. You can destroy all those natural supplements you're taking by just having a bad diet and destroying the gut microbes, because the gut microbes as a whole will have a much more powerful immune stimulating ability than anything else. So I think we're running down. We're going to get timed out from Instagram if we don't wrap it up, if people have more questions. Is plasma therapy good for corona? So what the individual is saying is that when somebody's been exposed to the corona and recovered, that they theoretically have antibodies or some kind of immunity, that if we get their plasma, that means everything but the red blood cells, and we give it to people who have the COVID. It's in the study process, so I think only time will tell. I'm not clear that it's out yet. And this is a very good question. Should a woman keep fasting during pregnancy? So first, real quick, during pregnancy, I think the immune system is compromised by the nature of pregnancy. So you are more vulnerable to viruses as a whole. So you should take extra precautions. So the people with pre-existing conditions, pregnancy should be classified as that. And then pre-existing conditions means blood pressure, diabetes, heart disease, lung disease like asthma, cancers, things like that. Now, I'm not saying pregnancy is a disease, because I had 4 of my children. And so what happens is very interesting things happen. During the pregnancy, my wife would develop certain allergies. With one pregnancy, with another pregnancy, those allergies would go away. So what I'm saying is that this is a time when the immune system is very complex. So I think that what you can do is make sure that you have a very clean diet, make sure that you eat good. There are a few supplements that are safe. They do promote folic acid, right? No doubt. I think omega-3 is going to be perfectly fine, and even vitamin D in moderation. So if you measure your levels, you could do that. But again, I'm not telling you what to do. Just talk to your doctor, measure the levels, and think about it. But I think pregnancy is an immune compromised state. As such, you should be more careful. So you should have a mask on when you go out, and you should be careful. People going out, when they come in, they must wash their hands and take off their outside garments. Hello from Ukraine. Great. I've got people from Bolivia, Ukraine. That's great. I love it. Just keep it coming. We're going to go live with somebody from Bolivia tomorrow. So I'm excited about that. I love meeting people with different cultures. I want to learn about their culture. And some of that culture, unfortunately, heavily goes around food. But let's look at the best things about food. And let's make friends during this month of Ramadan, a month of peace, where we're supposed to be sweet with our tongues and generous with our giving. And I'm happy to be generous if people need things, particularly medical advice and so forth. I'm happy if people need medical service and they don't have means. In other words, they don't have insurance. Do let them know that we're available, and we'll be happy to help out. I am part of the medical director and the chairman of the free clinic here in the Stirling area, Chantilly area. It's called the Adams Compassionate Healthcare Network. So ACHN, Adams Compassionate Healthcare Network, is an entirely free entity. So if your income level is down, and particularly in these times, and you qualify, then you get free care at that center. and I will make sure that I help you with that. So if you need any help, come and communicate to us, and I'll pass it on, and we will take care of you. As I said, I'm willing to even see people in my office who don't have the means during any time really, but particularly during this month. And stay tuned for the COVID testing, whether it's the nasal swab, the throat swab, even the antibody test with the blood. We'll be doing that. So people who need it to be free, we will offer it for free. But what we're kind of promoting is, if there are people with means who could donate and pay for a test, then we can give a free test to somebody who can't afford it. So we're willing to give our services free. I'm willing to give my services free. Our free clinic is obviously a free clinic. There is no compulsion in paying. Anybody from any faith, any religion, any gender, from anywhere can come. They don't have to be just in Loudoun County. They can be from any county. And we are very accommodating. We have a network of physicians. So this network particularly is very strong with specialists, and particularly eye specialists and cardiac specialists and dermatologists and all sorts. So we can definitely help you. We can connect you up with Inova and people who are giving certain charitable entities when it comes to mammograms and other cancer therapies. So that's good information. I hope during this month of Ramadan, let's be really giving in terms of at least knowledge, and be giving in trying to help somebody positively. Let's overlook the negative things, and wherever you can, there are 3 levels of what we call fighting in the way of the creator, right? In Islam, it's called jihad, but jihad is a good terminology. Some people have misused the word. So I want, during the month of Ramadan, to do my jihad. There's 3 levels. I'm going to say whether you like it or not. The first level is when something is bad, just feel bad at least, then you're human. The second one is speak out if you can. And the third one, the best one, is when you can actively do something. So that's, we should actively go out and help people. So that's my take on that. So fasting, if we don't have any problems with our health, look, as I said, you could be diabetic and fast. It will lower your sugar. There's absolutely nothing wrong with fasting during it. Now, if you're used to a high sugar, so listen, my disclaimer, go talk to your doctor. But why don't you come talk to me, and I will guide you, and I guarantee, even the insulin-dependent diabetic, if you come and see me, I can take you through Ramadan, even if you've missed a few, and I can adjust your insulin. I can help you monitor in ways. Now, so for people on like low-level medication or mild diabetes, and if they feel that their sugar drops, it's because you're used to a high sugar, and your cells are used to high sugar. So when you bring it down to normal, then you feel hypoglycemic. That's just because your body's that way. So you have to acclimatize to it. But I guarantee that you're not going to pass out, because true hypoglycemia is not only blood sugar lower than 70, it has to be like lower than 50 to pass out. I know, because my mother does that sometimes. She goes a little crazy, but she's diabetic, right? So she could. So diabetics could become hypoglycemic. So I'm not telling you out there to go all out, but I think that if you know how to have your complex carbs, then that sugar will go out throughout your day. The reason why I'm not afraid of hypoglycemia is that because your liver should be able to release the carbohydrates, release the glucose, and keep a homeostasis. So unless you are taking, so a diabetic that takes metformin theoretically can become hypoglycemic. A diabetic that takes these GLP receptor agonists like Trulicity and Bydureon and things like that, you theoretically cannot become hypoglycemic. It's only when you take things that push the insulin out, like the pills like glyburide or insulin, then you can go. So what I say to diabetics, again, don't take this as gospel to you. You have to consult your doctor. But the general rule of thumb is very, very simple. And you could take this to the bank. Just half the dose of the medication. Half the medication dose for diabetes, whether it's the pills or the insulin. If you want to embark on fasting, right, then you won't go hypo, right? And people with blood pressure, your blood pressure will come down, right? So I think that it's a fallacy to think that you cannot fast if you're diabetic. And most of the health parameters, look, let me just repeat one more time. Dr. Longo from the University of South California did intermittent fasting, amongst other fasting. And what he showed was that fasting lowered blood pressure, lowered blood sugar, lowered cholesterol, lowered abdominal waist fat, and reduced inflammation. So only good things happen. Of course, if you have pre-existing medical problems, then you must be a little bit more careful and judgmental. So don't take advice on social media. Just understand there's lots of ways around it. Consult your doctor. Consult us. You can do it remotely or come in face-to-face, and we'll go through the details. So we'll go through the diet. But nourish yourself well when you break your fast. And before you start your fast, have complex carb, have fats, and those will help you nourish. And then your body has the ability to liberate glucose. So your pancreas is designed to liberate glucose and store glucose. That's why when you have too much fructose, too much sugar, your liver starts to store it. You get fatty liver, right? Conversely, if you break that down, you'll be able to reverse fatty liver disease. Isn't that amazing? Reversing fatty liver disease naturally without needing to get an ultrasound. Worse still, do not ever get a biopsy. Just fix your diet and fix it. Don't end up with a biopsy of the liver to show you have fatty liver. I could have guessed 90% of the people with fatty liver just by taking a history. So as far as COVID testing, I'm assuming, is this testing done through blood sample? COVID testing are done for acute infection, nose or throat swab, and the blood test is for antibody. Were you exposed to it in the last 1 week? That's the IgM. Were you exposed to it over 2 or 3 weeks or longer? That's IgG, and that stays in your system for quite some time. We don't know how long yet because this is a new antibody. So more people are asking questions. You always leave the questions to the end, and you know what's going to happen. I'm going to get timed out, and I always love to answer all the questions. So people who say don't fast, eat fast food. No, nobody says eat fast food. People who say don't fast. I like you're a comedian. I love that. I like comedy too, but I get the feeling if I do too much comedy, you might not take me seriously. But we have a lot of fun in my office behind the scenes. What causes white tongue? I'm not sure what causes white tongue per se because there's no scientific literature that I know of, but I'll give you my observation. So when I have a lot of carbohydrates in my diet, then my tongue will be whiter. Of course, if I don't sleep well, my tongue will be whiter. If I'm dehydrated, so when I look at somebody's tongue, I always want to have them hydrated first. Then I can make a judgment on the tongue. Because when you dehydrate, it becomes white and furry. But other things to watch out for the tongue is that when you are dehydrated, you see the tooth ingrained on the sides of your teeth. So that's a sign of dehydration. The tongue should be smooth and pink and shiny. If you have lines like fissures, a straight line or lines going across your tongue, those are signs that you may have gastric erosion and gastric problems. Again, these are not necessarily diagnostic, like these are observations. So look at an animal's tongue, look at a dog's tongue, look at a cat's tongue, right? Then look at babies' tongues. They're pink and shiny, right? They're pink and shiny. And look at half the adults. So one of the best ways to look at your diet is look at your tongue every day about the same time when it's hydrated. And within a day of having a bad diet, you'll see your tongue is bad. You have a nice green diet and clean protein and your tongue becomes, so for the last 5 days, my tongue has been pink every single day, every single night, because I haven't had time to eat any junk food at all. So how can one facilitate ketosis while doing Ramadan fasting? Well, the definition of fasting is that because you're not eating anything, you're not eating any carbohydrates, you're not eating any protein, you're not eating fats, your body has to break the fats that are stored in your body, and those are released as ketones. So you are in a ketotic diet. How can one facilitate ketosis whilst doing Ramadan? I think that's what I've just said, that you are the ultimate keto diet is fasting. Keto diet has benefits, no doubt, and I'm not going to say it's bad. Clean protein is the way to do it, clean fat, but it's not going to be as good as an intermittent fast or time feeding. I'm timed out already.